Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Ronald Jasmin's profound insights on Mark chapter 2. Listen, if you are tired, and I'm talking about that deep, bone-weary tired from trying to keep up with every single church tradition, every auxiliary duty, and all those unspoken rules we grew up with, you are exactly where you need to be. We're going to unlearn some toxic spiritual habits today and reclaim your divine right to rest. Let's get into it.
Why does following God currently feel like a draining, joyless checklist? I want to validate that deep exhaustion right off the bat. So many of us were raised in communities where our actual worth was measured by how early we got to service, how many boards we served on, and making sure we looked picture perfect in our Sunday best. Hustle culture didn't just stay out in the corporate world, did it? Nope. It marched right down the aisle and took a front row seat in the sanctuary. We've somehow turned following Jesus into a performance we have to perfect, rather than a relationship we get to enjoy.
Section 1. The burden of the checklist.
Back in Jesus' day, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, had turned spiritual practices into this massive, exhausting public spectacle. They fasted strictly to earn status, walking around looking visibly miserable just so everybody in town knew exactly how holy they were. It was an absolute performance. But Jesus completely flips the script on them. He teaches that spiritual practices should be private, responsive, and entirely about internal transformation. The Pharisees missed the very heart of God because they were just too busy putting on a show for the community and managing their religious resumes.
Get this, the Pharisees actually fasted exactly 2 days a week, usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why? Because it was a measurable metric they could brag about. But listen, when you start obsessing over metrics instead of a genuine connection with the Creator, you completely lose the plot. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we do the exact same thing today. When you measure your spiritual health purely by a perfect attendance record, how loud you praise during service, or how many hours you clock on the usher board, you are just surviving a checklist. You aren't actually living out your faith.
Section 2. From mourning to celebration.
So folks essentially ask Jesus, "Hey, why aren't your disciples fasting and looking miserable like the rest of us?" And Jesus hits them with this: how can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? Jesus is literally comparing himself to a bridegroom. He's telling them, my presence changes absolutely everything. You don't fast at a wedding. Yet so many of us are living our faith like we're wearing all black to a funeral, just mourning and striving, when Jesus is actively inviting us to a massive, joyous celebration.
We have got to make a fundamental shift here. We need to move away from the old religious system, the one defined by joyless duty, fasting out of sheer obligation, and living like God is completely distant or absent. Instead, we have to step into a new spiritual rhythm defined by celebration and feasting in the grace of a completely present God. Think about the difference between a rigid, exhausting march and a flowing, life-giving dance. If your faith is constantly draining the life out of you, you are simply dancing to the wrong beat.
Section 3. Upgrading your spiritual mindset.
Jesus used a brilliant metaphor for this exact transition. He said you can't pour new, expanding wine into old, rigid wineskins, or they will absolutely burst. These new wineskins represent the flexible capacity you need to unlearn old toxic patterns so you can actually hold the transformative life God is offering. And look, growth requires stretching. For a lot of us, that means doing the incredibly hard work of unlearning toxic church hurt and challenging that, well, we've just always done it this way, mindset that has kept our communities exhausted and stagnant for generations.
You simply cannot fit new life into an old religious system. You can't just patch Jesus onto an unchanged, burnout-inducing lifestyle and magically expect peace. So many of us desperately want a better future. We crave that spiritual rest, but we are trying to squeeze the Holy Spirit's transforming work into our deeply ingrained, exhausting daily grinds. It's exactly like trying to drop a brand new engine into a rusted-out car that hasn't seen a mechanic in 20 years. Something fundamental has to change.
Section 4. Rest is a requirement.
The religious leaders got absolutely furious because Jesus' disciples were picking grain to eat on the Sabbath. They were totally obsessed with the rigid rules of their day. But we need to deeply redefine what the Sabbath means for our world today. It is not just another restrictive rule that you can fail at. It is fuel. It is literal neuro-recovery for your brain and routine maintenance for your spirit. Taking a break isn't quitting. It is a vital, required biological and spiritual system designed to keep you functioning at your best. We have to stop treating rest as a reward for burning out and start treating it as the absolute prerequisite for living well.
Then Jesus drops an absolute bombshell on the crowd. He tells them, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. I really want to let that sit for a second. God's systems were designed to serve you. They were designed to bless you, protect you, and restore you. They were absolutely not designed to enslave you to a packed church calendar or crush you with guilt just for taking a day off. The tool is for you. You aren't for the tool.
And this brings us to a profound, incredibly liberating truth. Rest is resistance. This concept is so powerful, especially for us, living in a society and, frankly, carrying a history that has constantly equated our worth solely with our productivity, our output, and our physical labor. The culture around us, and sometimes even the traditions within our own communities, will try to tell you that if you aren't grinding, if you aren't constantly producing and serving, you aren't valuable. But choosing to intentionally stop, power down, and rest, that is a radical, holy reclamation of your human dignity. You do not have to earn the right to rest. You rest simply because you are human, and you are intricately designed by God to need it. Stepping off that treadmill is a profound act of faith.
Section 5. Relationship over rigid rules. Jesus ends his confrontation by saying, "So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." What does that actually mean for you on a random Tuesday morning or a super busy Sunday afternoon? It means Jesus has ultimate authority over every tradition, every expectation, and every single denominational rule you've been carrying on your back. He is the architect of the whole thing, and because he is Lord, you have full permission, right now today, to drop the exhausting expectations of others and just follow him.
So, how do we practically step into this freedom today? First, rediscover your joy. Stop going through the dead motions and celebrate that God is actually with you right now. Second, surrender those old wineskins. Name the toxic habits and traditions you're clinging to, and finally let them go. Third, take a real Sabbath. Give yourself one full day a week with zero guilt and zero hustle. Fourth, evaluate your traditions. Be honest with yourself. Are you following Jesus or just defending your preferences? And finally, pursue the relationship. Stop performing. Talk to Jesus like a real friend and pour out what's actually in your heart.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative truth. Jesus is Lord, not your rules. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer, remember this. It is time to stop surviving a religious checklist and start living in a life-giving rhythm with genuine purpose. Drop the burden. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to celebrate. So what old, exhausting rule are you going to drop today so you can finally step into the relationship you were designed for?